This episode of United Hour is sponsored by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Lads, it's time to gear up and get yourself the gift of shaving this holiday season. I'm talking about the Manscaped Perfect Package 2.0. You don't want to use the same trimmer on your face as you're using on your balls. That's just nasty. That's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their lawn mower has proprietary skin-safe technology, so this trimmer won't nick or snag your nuts. Manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past. Manscaped also has the Crop Preserver, an anti-chafing deodorant and moisturizer. You already put deodorant on your armpits, so why aren't you putting deodorant on the smelliest part of your body? So go over to manscaped.com and you can get 20% off and free shipping from their entire range with the code BIGHEADS. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code BIGHEADS. BIGHEADS. Always use the right tools for the job. Your balls will thank you.
The shout now. Well done, Bobby Johnson. Well done, Manchester United. Beckham. Into Sheringham. And Solskjaer has won it. Manisov saved it. United again. Ready.
Welcome to United Hour, your official Red Cafe podcast for all things Manchester United. I'm your host, Nick.
And I'm David.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast, David. For our Red Cafe listeners, I'll say you would be known as DVG7, but I think you've also had a couple of other names on there in the past, right?
Yeah, I've had a few before. I took some time off to focus on some work-related things this year, and it was a permanent break that I asked for at the time, but once I took care of those work things, I felt obliged to come back and find out what was going on in the forum and with everything that's going on with the team. It's discussion I like being involved in, and I always find the forum is a good and a bad place to go sometimes, but I mean the reality is we all get a little bit addicted to the site, and yeah, so it's fun to be back, and it's been fun to have a more kind of focus on just football related things as opposed to winding people up from time to time, which I might have been known for. But no, I'm happy to be here, and I've been an avid listener of the podcast since you launched it years and years and years ago, and it's really, really good to be part of it. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And maybe we'll give you a mention later because I know you're involved in other kind of non-footballing podcasts. And in fact, we should have had Colm on today, and unfortunately couldn't make it at the last minute. But yes, it'll just be the two of us. We've got 2 matches since we last recorded. Not the best of results, unfortunately. So yeah, you're not joining us at a positive time. So yeah, let's see if you can bring some positivity or add to the negativity. But yeah, we had Astana out on Thursday, where, I think it was more about the kind of players getting a run out than the actual result. I wasn't too bothered about the actual result on the day. But yeah, we're recording Sunday night after we've drawn 2-2 at home with Aston Villa, which is not good at all, really, because I think I'd said this time last week that really that was looking like a must-win, given some of the results we'd had recently. We've not got that win. So yeah, we'll go into that in a little more detail. But I mean, before we dive straight into the matches, why don't you kind of give us where are you at the moment? Because the big talking points are always all about Ole in, Ole out. And last week, I think Colm officially went in the Ole out camp, and Reece has been losing his patience week by week. I've still been trying to stay positive and see that there is a bit of a long-term plan going on, and I'd like to see it executed. But, as the weeks go on, if we don't get the results, then it's more and more difficult to defend that. So, yeah, where are you on that at the moment?
I mean, when I think post Sir Alex Ferguson, I've obviously not been happy with the way things have gone. No one has, but I do see it as a sort of necessary part of my evolution as a football fan to experience the tough times. And I do think that when we eventually, or I guess at this stage, hopefully get back to our former glory, I think having gone through this barren spell will make any future success taste that much better. So I'm not as negative as maybe your average Man United fan right now. But as far as being Ole in or Ole out, I still don't know. I love the guy. I've been fortunate enough to meet the guy and have conversations with him in person when he was a player with us. I met him in 2000 and 2001. Lovely guy in person.
All right, where did you meet him?
I managed to get tickets to the Players' Lounge after an Ipswich game and an Arsenal game. My mum had sorted it out for me. I don't really know how, but basically I got to go in the Players' Lounge after the game, and all the players that were there in the 2001 and 01-02 season, I got to meet them all and have some sandwiches with them and find out that your hero Roy Keane is maybe not the person you thought he was going to be up close and in person.
Okay, yeah, quite a quiet guy. Doesn't have that much to say, does he?
He just came through the door from the changing room and just went straight past everyone, right down to his seat, and had his banana and had no interest in talking to me like whatsoever. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, Solskjaer was just a gentleman, and I love talking to him. Obviously, he's responsible for most of our most amazing moment as a Man United fan. And to be able to speak to him was amazing. And I do have that sense of attachment to him now and want him to succeed. But I genuinely, this season, I don't think he's been able to put out his best team yet. And I don't want to judge him based on playing an almost second string midfield. And it's just not his setup yet this season. And he has some players to come back and to fit in together. And until I see that and see if it turns their fortunes around, I don't want to be Ole out, but it's getting tough. I mean, the results speak for themselves. I think that going into the game today, a lot of people were not expecting to win, which against a newly promoted team that have one or two players who would make our squad, maybe not even our starting 11, it's just not on as a Man United fan. And Solskjaer ultimately is going to fall at his feet, right? And so right now I'm still Ole in, but getting to that stage where it's just his positions are becoming untenable.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, and yeah, I might be somewhere around the same place as you. I mean, it's funny. Like last week, I said, look, Villa is a must-win because we're playing at home. They're nowhere near on the kind of run of form that Sheffield United have been on. Not been struggling. They've been performing all right, but they're near the bottom of the table. And I said, yeah, look, given especially our recent results. And there's no excuse, especially as well, that we knew we were going to have a full rested squad midweek because we sent the kids out to Astana. So this week there was really no excuses apart from the fact that we're still very down to bare bones in midfield. In a way, like today's game, it's almost a lot of the same things we talked about last week against Sheffield United. We start badly, concede, then we actually come back into it, end up being in the winning position and then throw it away again. I did think that last week against Sheffield United that we literally only played well for about 10 minutes. Whereas today I thought there was a vast improvement after half-time, even though we were not good at all first half, and a lot of the same problems that we saw last week, basically all emanating from a weak midfield. And Andreas Pereira in particular, that's kind of where we're really falling down. But even then, you still say, look, like you said, it's Aston Villa, we're Manchester United, we're playing at home. Whichever way you look at it, a draw is not going to be acceptable. I was all waiting for the kind of lineup pre-match. Everybody wanted to see who's going to be playing in midfield because Solskjaer had said at a press conference the other day that McTominay was a maybe, and I think we were all hoping he made it. I mean, as a Scotsman, you must be very proud to see a regular Scottish player playing in our team again.
Yeah, it's nice to see that. He's kind of the successor to Darren Fletcher is what we're all hoping it can be, and I was a huge fan of Fletcher. He was always one for the big occasions, and I do feel that McTominay is going to turn into that type of player. I obviously wanted to see him back, but I wasn't surprised with the lineup we went with, except for Mata starting. I just don't know what he brings to the team at this point when you think what it looks like, what Solskjaer is trying to do with playing quick on the counter and getting pace with Rashford, James and Martial. I just don't think Mata complements that. So I was surprised to see him there. Even though I don't rate him and I know that he played in midweek, I thought Lingard might have a chance of starting today because his attitude that he showed in Astana, and I know we didn't get the win and it wasn't the best performance, but he was one of the standouts, if you can call it that. And I thought that he might still be riding a bit of a high from that, and maybe that was an opportunity for Solskjaer to say, look, I've trusted you to lead those young guys in Astana, and I'm going to trust you to go and help us get the 3 points today. I feel like Lingard would have linked up a bit better with the front three than what Mata ever could. So that was the main surprise for the lineup for me today, seeing Mata in there. I think the rest of the team picked itself, to be honest, other than maybe Shaw replacing Williams. But yeah, Mata in there, I just wasn't sure about that. And I think we really need McTominay back, which, to be saying that right now after this season, that's where we're at. We're really hoping for the return of Scott McTominay.
Yeah, look, he has actually become a really important player for us. And, now that he's not there, you really see what we've been missing. I'd said before this game, please can we have anybody apart from Andreas Pereira at centre mid, because he was just so awful last week against Sheffield United. I'd picked out last week they had only a 65% pass completion, was directly responsible for one of the goals. And I just said, look, surely he cannot be playing in that position again. But the problem was, of course, we sent a team out on the longest ever European trip out to Astana on Thursday night. And I guess Ole just didn't think any of those players should be starting again so quickly, which I can kind of understand when you've got fresh legs who've been rested waiting at home. But, whether it was Garner, whether it was Lingard, I was just hoping there was something else, somebody else or somebody coming back from injury, whether Matic, McTominay. But no, we ended up back with Andreas Pereira in midfield again. And yeah, I suppose he's thrown in Mata just because he's one of those other fresh players who's been at home waiting to play. I'm assuming that Ole actually picked this team before even he'd sent the players out to Astana, which is why these players stayed back. If he'd had any intention of playing somebody else, he would have kept them. So I guess these two teams were picked way in advance. But yeah, there was a lot of criticism of the lineup. We have a kind of WhatsApp group amongst some of the podcast guys, and as soon as lineups are announced, everybody's giving their 2p's worth on it. And yeah, nobody was that impressed by seeing Mata and Pereira thrown in over there. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of, what other options were there today? That's the difficult position we're left in when you've got McTominay, Matic, Pogba all missing. We know that the midfield is already a weak area, and it's just, not looking good at all there. So it wasn't that surprising to me then how we kind of started. Mata just never got into the game. I was looking at some of the stats. He's only touched the ball 33 times in the whole game, which is pretty poor for somebody who's playing in a central area. Sometimes you expect that your striker or somebody like that might have not get that many touches, but even Martial had more touches than him today. And it's sad to say because he's as a character, I really, like the guy, and I understand why he's been kept around because we need some experience in the squad. But the more and more you see him, the more and more he just looks that he's done and finished. As you say, especially the style Ole wants to play, which is supposed to be fast counter-attacking, also pressing. Neither of the things that his age that he's really managing to do there. So yeah, again, like I said, I feel a bit for Ole because maybe he didn't have that many options, but just didn't work out at all, did it?
Yeah, and I think with Mata, there was a couple of times in the first half where he made a few runs in behind. There was one where he was offside, and then another one where he linked up with Rashford. And I was like, that's exactly what he needs to be like. But that was the only 2 times he did it in the entire game. The rest of the game, he was so still and lifeless, it seemed. And a player of his ability on the ball, the guy's first touch is as good as I've seen at United this decade. He can trap a ball from almost any type of pass. It's unreal. But he just doesn't take advantage of the skill set that he does have. He needs to go create some space for himself and then dictate the play. And you just didn't see him do that often enough today. And I think you're right. It's the case that his age is catching up with him, and he's just not the type of player that can perform well in the league against a team like Aston Villa anymore. When the Mata of old, he'd be dominating that game. He'd be the man of the match, 9.5 out of 10 performance. But we're just not going to get that from him anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, the one thing is that he does at least keep the ball and he doesn't give it away, which was a big problem against Sheffield United last week, that we just couldn't even string together 2 passes from midfield. Mata had our highest pass succession rate today, 96%. So yeah, that is the one positive that he brings there. But as I said, he didn't actually have that many touches, didn't get into the game enough. And a lot of his passing nowadays is very safe and almost too safe, because in the past he used to be that kind of creative player that could pick out those balls that you needed to the forward line. And fortunately nowadays he just seems to go for the much safer option, just keeping hold of the ball, which is not always the worst thing. But when you're playing at home against Aston Villa, then you're really expecting a little bit more than that. There even was, I think, a couple of occasions I remember back in the match where he had a really good opportunity, I thought, to shoot, and he passed it instead. And yeah, there's a couple like that where he's not making the right decisions anymore. And as I say, as a character, I can understand why he's still being kept around the squad, because you can't just have youngsters everywhere. You do need some experience in there, but it's just not looking like he's going to be making that difference for us anymore. And then you say, yeah, you'd rather throw in whether it's a Garner or even like say Lingard had a pretty decent match midweek for the first time. So yeah, Ole does kind of deserve some criticism on that, but at the same time, you could say, what other options did he have? So yeah, it's a difficult one when you have all these players out. I mean, one player we talked about a lot last week, and Reese especially is a big fan of his, was Jack Grealish, and there has been some kind of link for us. And yeah, he's obviously inevitably he's come in, stuck the ball in the net with a brilliant finish within the first phase of the game. Do you think it was a great finish, or do you blame, Pereira's the player on him? And for me, there's a lot of blame on Pereira, who's just let him come inside and given him all the time in the world to make that finish.
There's a lot of blame on Pereira, and he did the right thing in his head, because it looked like he was trying to show him on the outside onto his left foot, but where he got his body position made it quite easy for Grealish just to slide inside him. It was horrible defending. I mean, you want to show him onto his left foot, and Pereira sort of took a step to the right before trying to show him onto his left foot, and Grealish just cuts inside ease. It was you can't take anything away from the finish. It's one of the more beautiful goals I think I've seen this season in terms of where it ended up in the net. That was really nice to see. But no, it's horrible defending. The guy is pretty lethal on his right foot, and you try and show him outside and then just don't do it. It was weird. Pereira, he's not a defensive player, we all know that, but at least do something to stop him cutting inside you so friggin' easily, right?
Totally. And yeah, it's 2 weeks in a row where he's directly responsible for goals against us, as far as I'm concerned. As I said, for me, I said he was one of our worst players I've seen, just not last week, the whole season. He wasn't as bad this week. His pass success rate was at 83%, which is obviously a vast improvement on his 65 from last week. But I do still think that Fred is really having to do a lot of work to make up for the deficiencies of his partner in midfield over there. I would actually say, on Fred, I actually thought that was probably his best game he's had for us. He was one of the few today who I thought actually had a good game. And, he's played a lot better recently, but he was still only, he's coming from being awful and playing at 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. And I'd say today was the first time I actually thought, I'd give him a solid 8 out of 10, maybe even our man of the match, either him or Daniel James, I'd say today, were the two who kind of were still doing what I'd want them to do. Whereas, not seeing enough from a lot of the other players. But, where do you think we've fallen down? For me, I still do say that, look, the midfield is weak. That is the big issue. Or do you think there's bigger issues than that, and it's not just about the players who are out?
To go on your point about Fred's game today, I absolutely 100% agree. I thought he was our man of the match. And one of the good takeaways from today is if Fred keeps playing like that, and we have McTominay and Pogba back, with those three fit, we potentially have our midfield fixed as good as it can be this season without reinforcements. McTominay on form, Fred on form, Pogba on some kind of form, because we never know how consistent he's going to be. That's a reasonably strong midfield, and I think that Ole probably does need a run of games with those three performing for him before we determine whether or not he should stay or go. And then to get to your next point about, is that the problem? I think our defence is weak. And I know Wan-Bissaka had probably his least effective game for us today, certainly from a defensive standpoint. I thought he was quite shocking, to be honest. I don't rate Maguire. If I was looking at him today and thinking, if I was watching him play for someone else, what would I rate him at in terms of how much it would cost to buy in the transfer market? And I was like 25, maybe 30 million, being generous. He was bad today, and I don't think he's done enough to justify his price tag. And I don't know what he's like in the dressing room, but I don't think he's done enough to justify being given that captain's armband. I don't know who should get it instead of him, but his performances for me have not come anywhere close to justifying the price tag. And I think we're at a stage where we've been trying to fix our defence for 4 or 5 years, and we still don't have it fixed. it's the Lindelof-Maguire partnership is about as good as we have, and I don't think it's good enough. It's slow, it's weak, it's inexperienced, and for me, it's just not working. And I think that we have our midfield, like our strongest midfield, to come back. And I think we have an attacking lineup, and the four players we have up there, and Martial, Rashford, James, and Greenwood. I think we have those positions sorted at least until the end of the season. For me, it's the defence is still letting us down more than anything. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it's difficult to watch us defend at times, and even Wan-Bissaka having an off day today.
Earlier in the season, everybody was saying, "Oh, our defence is sorted," but we're lacking up front and in creativity in midfield. And the kind of impression was that we're absolutely solid now in defence, and at least we've made a big change, because last year we conceded the most Premier League goals we've ever conceded. It has been a big change, and I actually think that there's been a drop in Maguire's performance since he's been given the captain's armband. Because early in the season I thought he was still looking solid, not spectacular. I thought he's looking solid, he's still getting to know his teammates, he'll grow into the season. But I do actually agree with you on this. Probably last week against Sheffield United, I first noticed that he seemed like, he was not happy, he didn't seem like calm. And I did partly put it down, and I actually forgot to mention it last week, that obviously he was going back to his old club. And maybe that often happens to players when they go back to their old teams, they don't perform. For years and years, Rooney never did anything at Goodison Park, and there's even other players where there's a whole mental kind of block for them going back to play against old teams. And so, he was not great last week, and kind of slightly thought, maybe that pressure of going back to his old place. But today, again, I do agree with you. There was some time, it was right early on, he gave a yellow card by like almost rugby tackling somebody. It was literally in like the first 10 minutes or something. And then, for a central defender, as soon as you're on a yellow card, then you're always slightly reluctant to do a few things that you might go for with that risk of the red card handing over you. At the same time, I'd say, it's hardly a coincidence that we're missing McTominay and that all of a sudden the defence looks a bit weaker. For me, a lot of it goes back to that. A defensive unit needs protection, and they're getting very little. Where, as I said, Fred is having to do like 2 months running to make up for Andreas's obvious deficiencies, and then in front of that you've got Mata as well, who's obviously not going to be putting in the groundwork defensively nowadays. So I do see where you're coming from, and even the last two performances there has been some shaky moments, but I'd still kind of put it a lot down to the midfield that's in front of them, and a lot being more asked from them. But I'm not sure as well about whether he's really thrived and stepped into this captaincy position. And, we've had this before where, remember when Valencia was made captain and kind of then didn't really want it and was given the number 7 shirt. And some players, when they get that kind of extra responsibility, they can't handle it and it doesn't work for them. So, maybe Maguire is not the one. I don't know. As I say, it could be down to that midfield. But I do agree with you that he's not been as good in the last couple of weeks at all. It's not quite sure what it's down to. I mean, one thing I would say, though, is that I personally think Tuanzebe should be coming into the team ahead of Lindelof. I would prefer to see that as our first choice, the partnership. And I think he would have come in if he hadn't got injured. I think Ole was ready to play him into the team as our first choice centre-back partnership. Then he got injured and now he's just come back again. So it will be interesting to see over the next couple of weeks whether he does phase Tuanzebe back into the team or not. What do you think of Tuanzebe the few times you've seen him?
I've been a big fan of Tuanzebe since I saw him play a couple of youth games, and I do think he's the future of our defence. I think he's that good. I think Mourinho was onto something when he said, I think a few years ago, that you only needed to see him for 10 minutes to know that he was going to be a standout player. And every time I've seen him, I mean, the assurance for his age is remarkable. He's such a composed player. And he does make mistakes, and usually they're positional ones and maybe a couple of rash challenges when he should maybe back off and stand his ground. But I think he's destined to be at the heart of our defence for a good period of time. And I don't see any reason, if he's fit, why he shouldn't be playing in front of Lindelof. I mean, I rate Maguire as the better between he and Lindelof, but one of them has to step out, because the performances the last few games just haven't been there. And Tuanzebe's I think he's ready. He just needs to get his fitness concerns get those put to bed, and then be given an extended run in the team. And I think that with him on the right side of defence, he and Wan-Bissaka, that it takes care of that right side. I just don't see, when they're on form, how any team's left-hand attacking side is going to get by those two, because there's so much pace, there's so much intelligence, there's so much strength. It just solidifies the right side of our defence. And I hope that's what Ole does moving forward, because, I mean, Lindelof again today, he's just not justified his price tag whatsoever, not even close to it. And I do think that Maguire needs someone with a bit more pace and power beside him, and at least give that partnership an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I do think we will see that now over the next few games, that Tuanzebe will be phased back in. He had 90 minutes out at Astana, so yeah, I can understand why he didn't play today. But yeah, I would expect him to come back into the team, and we'll see what happens from there. And in fact, it might even give us a chance if we're really lacking in midfield. I personally would rather play Lindelof or even Tuanzebe, who've both been mentioned as defensive midfield options, in there ahead of Andres Pereira. So for me, we'll talk about the next few games coming, but for me, if McTominay is not back, that is a better option. And look, I really just don't want to see Andreas in central midfield again, because yeah, it's twice now that he's failed there, and so yeah, it just shouldn't happen again at all.
Pereira, brilliant crossing! Oh yes, they get the goal! There can only be one man, Marcus Rashford. Where would they be without Marcus Rashford?
I think we did pretty well to come back into the game. Like, it was almost looking, there was, Villa at one point, it looked like they scored their second goal, but thankfully it was chalked off for offside. And at that point, you were worrying that, look, this is really just going the same as last weekend. But thankfully, we did get back into the game. And yes, some credit to Andreas, who I've been really picking on, because he did actually come up with the assist. So yeah, he does deserve, maybe made up for his error in the Grealish goal. But do you think we deserved that equaliser there, or was it against the run of play? I saw Ole in the post-match saying that maybe we were lucky to come in at 1-1 at half-time. What did you think?
Yeah, I think we were lucky. I think we were really, really struggling to deal with Grealish. Every time he got the ball, I felt like he was going to go past someone and create something. I think over the course of the first half, they did have the better run of play. And obviously it came from a Tyrone Mings mistake that we ended up getting the equaliser. I don't know what he was thinking there at all. You can't take anything away from Pereira's delivery. I mean, if, say, Trent Alexander-Arnold does that, we're talking about it for a week. It was an unreal cross. But yeah, I think we were lucky to go in at 1-1 at half-time, to be honest. I think they were the stronger team, which is such a crazy thing to say, that Aston Villa were the strongest team in the first half at Old Trafford. But yeah, that's just where we are at the moment.
I think we were lucky to be one each at half time, but second half I thought we did better. Even though they could have scored, we should have scored more. Today we didn't start well, but we turned it round. So they got the character, attitude. But I'd like to keep hold of them games and then win, because that's a big difference between 1 and 3 points. And I think we've probably 6 or 7 times we've had the lead and conceded.
I did think after half-time that we came out and looked a lot better, and that Ole deserves some credit for that, because yeah, it's something that he's taken a lot of criticism for, has been his kind of game management, whether it's his substitutions, whether it's what's going on at half-time. And today was one of the days where I did think that he went in and sent us back out looking a lot better. I think he tweaked the system slightly, almost looked like he'd told the players to go 4-4-2 with Mata on the right, James from the left, and like with Rashford and Martial up front. Is that the way you saw it?
Yeah, I noticed that maybe 5 minutes in, just how close Rashford and Martial were playing to one another. And then I had a look where Mata and James are. I was like, oh, he's gone 4-4-2. This should be interesting, because I don't know how I feel about Mata as a right-sided midfielder with defensive and attacking responsibility, but it does seem to work. I've been a critic of Ole for not being able to manage games at half-time. And he did make the change today, and I still don't think I saw enough in terms of how they coped with what Aston Villa were doing in the first half and dealt with it in the second. I still felt that he could have changed more. But what he did do obviously worked somewhat and got us ahead in the game.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with our second half performance, to be honest. And the only thing that obviously pissed off about is that we didn't hang on to the win. We had started creating some chances. The game did open up a bit because, Villa were then standing out quite long balls and getting quite a lot of joy with getting players into the channels and still creating the odd chance against us as well. But I did think that we were really starting to take control of the game. And the goal came at a good time as well. And then, the only problem is that, we've just 2 minutes later, we've let them back in. It's the same killer as kind of last week, really. It's difficult to really, you see this basically. First of all, I just assumed it was offside. And I was like, oh, I'm sure he's offside. It's going to be chalked off. And then all of a sudden you realise that Williams has played 2 or 3 Villa players onside. And I guess when you have these kind of young players, you are going to get that slightly naive decisions every now and again. I mean, would you blame Williams, or do you just say it's down to his youth that these kind of things are going to happen?
I feel bad for him because when you look at where he was in the box at the time, it was almost as if he was playing as the right back. Like he was on the other side of the pitch and he'd been on the whole game. Maybe his perspective was a little bit different, but I mean, you're talking a couple of milliseconds difference between stepping out and them being offside. So, I mean, you can say naivety, but top players do that all the time. It was a pretty good little dink into the box, and I mean, you don't expect Tyrone Mings to pull off a finish like that. So, I mean, some blame is at Williams for not getting out quick enough, but I mean, I don't want to criticise him too much. I mean, he's been a bit of one of the positives the past little while for us, and I mean, it's I can forgive him for that. The whole defence switched off, and I still don't know why we see players put their hands up and claim for offside. They know that if it's offside, it's going to get reviewed and it's going to come back. I just see what the whole playing to the whistle thing. I was expecting to see more of that because they know VAR is going to check things and just play on. But you still see like Maguire just stopping, hand up, just asking for offside. VAR will tell you if it's offside. You just get on with the game.
Yeah, I guess it's just force a habit that people are just used to playing in that way, claiming it. But you're right that now, because of VAR, there's kind of no point in it. And you have to just, keep going and see what comes back from there. We'll also say that, it wasn't all on Williams. That I think it was Grealish again, wasn't it, who sends the ball in and had all the time in the world to be like waiting and playing that ball without getting closed down quick enough at all. So it's not totally on him. But the worst thing was that it's just literally, 2 minutes after that we've scored, we've let them back in the game, which is, it's at the point that we should be going on and getting goal number 3 and 4 and really like winning this match. And again, like we've thrown it away. That's just the really disappointing. And I think it's at least 5 or 6 times that we've been winning positions this season and have come away with a draw. It's happened time and time again. Wolves earlier in the season, Southampton, last week against Sheffield United, against Villa. So that really is a major issue now. And it's probably becoming like a mental issue for the team as well. Every time they're going to go up, they're going to be worrying about it. These are the kind of worries that week by week becoming more and more of an issue. One thing, if you've listened to us, that we've always focused on a bit and probably hasn't mentioned it for a couple of shows, is the XG. So I was just looking at that this week. So according to the XG, we should have won this match, but it was at 1.9 versus 1.3 for Villa. Last week we should have lost the game. So I guess these things kind of take the rub of the green. It's quite obvious. Like last week we were lucky to get 3-3, whereas XG suggests we would have lost that match. Is it XG a stat you followed much? Is it something you put much faith in?
I don't know if it would categorise me as being old school or not, but I just cannot get on board with this XG as being indicative at all of reality. I mean, you're saying that we should have won today and we should have lost last week. Well, we drew both games. So for me, XG is it's a new stat that I understand the metrics of it and the algorithm behind it. It's never going to 100% support the reality. And to be honest, I feel that the discussions I have with people were a bit better and more personable before XG came in. So I'm not a huge advocate for it, to be honest. I don't know if that'll rub anyone the wrong way. But, I mean, I don't know how you can determine expected goals based on the amount of variables in a game of football. It's just, for me, it's rubbish, to be honest. Whenever I see it and see a discussion on the forum about it, I tend just to ignore it and move on, to be honest.
Yeah, no, fair enough. You're not the only one with that kind of opinion. I do like it as a stat because I do think there's a lot of kind of science and data behind it. So it is always interesting to look at it, but it's not the be all and end all either. I mean, the kind of theory earlier in the season was that we weren't getting what we deserved, and it was going to change, and it's not really gone that way. I mean, that's the really frustrating thing today, that because the league's so bunched up, that you get those 3 points, and we'd be sat in fifth position, only I think 6 points off top four because Chelsea lost, which is like a pretty good position to be in, bearing in mind where we have been about a month ago. But instead, we're ninth. We're in that kind of just like cluster with like Arsenal and everything in there, still below Sheffield United, still below Wolves, which just really isn't good enough at all. And as I say, this week there really wasn't any excuse for it because everybody was supposed to be fresh after having a total rest. Whereas, the last couple of weeks where we played Sheffield United or whatever, they'd had like no midweek games, whereas we had. You can kind of say, all right, these teams have had that rest, whereas we've not had it. But this week there really wasn't any excuse for it at all. I mean, if we look at that Astana match, I really enjoyed this Astana game because, I like seeing these new players coming through. For me, it's one of the big positives of Ole's regime is these kids and academy players getting a go and seeing what kind of we might see in the future. I mean, are you somebody who follows the young players, or is it only once they get to the first team that you take any notice?
No, I've always followed the young players. The starting point with that was probably Bojan Djordjic. I remember reading about him once now. He had won the Jimmy Murphy Award. And I was like, I have no idea who this is. And then I started trying to read up everything I could about him. And then since then, whenever someone is like 15, 16 and starts getting a bit of a reputation, I tend to follow them and check on them, see how they're doing with the academy teams and if they've been promoted to the 18s, 21s or the reserves. So I do follow it, and I'm like you. It was amazing to see a group that young go like a 6-hour flight and put on for a lot of the game a pretty decent performance considering the circumstances. I thought what we saw, there was a few players there who I would expect to go on to have Premier League level careers and potentially with us. But that type of thing, it just makes you proud to know that we can put out an academy team or mostly an academy team and be competitive in really, really difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I did actually criticise Ole a little bit a couple of weeks ago when he put out a very strong team against Partizan. But in a way, because we won that game, now it gave us a chance to have a rest and give these players a run out. I was a bit worried about all these kids getting sent out to the far Soviet Union. Kazakhstan is literally the longest place you can go. The longest trip we've ever had in a UEFA match, that's for sure. And 5 hours time difference. I think it was like minus 15 or something like that. But so I wasn't actually expecting that much. And I thought we'd lose this game because, all right, they're not like top quality team, but they're playing at home and they're still experienced players. They've won quite a few games to get this far, so they're not total no-hopers. But we actually started really well, really fresh. And like half an hour in, I think I'd made a comment saying, hey, look, our youth team's looking better than our first team at the moment. Maybe we should switch these two round and play these lads every week. But maybe, it was a bit too much to expect them to do that for 90 minutes. But I actually thought we were quite unlucky not to be a couple of goals up by half-time, really. And Jesse Lingard did finally break his duck, and hopefully that can give him a bit of confidence back.
Lingard, fine strike. His first ever time captaining Manchester United, the youngest team in Europe in the club's history. And Lingard, inside 10 minutes, marks it with the first goal and ends a run of 28 games without one to give United the lead.
If you think that Solskjaer goes up to Lingard before he heads on the plane to Astana or before he announces which squad is going and which squad is staying, if you're Jesse Lingard, you know that when you're told you're going to be on the plane to Astana and you're going to be starting, it kind of puts into perspective your place in the manager and the squad plans at that moment. So he knows he's sat on that plane on his way to... He's playing not as a punishment, but it's because his performances haven't been good enough. And it would have been so easy for him to sulk and to not look interested. But his performance for me was the highlight of the game. and for me, the highlights of his time in the past couple of years with us, because he did put the effort in, and it gets a lot of well-deserved and undeserved criticism, and I really was so happy to see him put in the effort and be an example to some of those younger players. I just think he deserves some form of credit for that. And then when I think of the young guys that I was impressed by, I kind of wanted to see more of Galbraith, because I've followed him since he was 13. He's been tipped as being like potentially a next big thing, but he didn't really get enough time. So the next one I wanted to see was Tahith Chong, who I thought maybe in a circumstance where he's not a senior player but one of the most experienced in terms of game time, I thought that might be his chance to shine, and he just didn't. And then on the other end of that spectrum, I thought that Ethan Laird he looks like he could be a Premier League right back. I mean, he struggled as the game went on, I thought, but initially I was like, yeah, that's competition for Wan-Bissaka in a few years for sure.
Yeah, definitely. There was quite a few times Laird beats his man over there and manages to put in a half-decent cross. So yeah, attacking-wise, I thought he looked really good. The ones like I said, I was really looking forward to see. I wanted to see a lot more of Garner, because yeah, I'm hoping that he can actually come in and be a regular first team squad option at least. But I mean, basically at this point, I'm just desperate for any option apart from Andreas Pereira playing in midfield. So yeah, there was Garner. Then in fact, Levitt next to him as well, I thought had a pretty good game. They both looked pretty assured, on the same wavelength, playing the right balls that we just don't see, like our first team players playing from midfield. That's the biggest problem, is that, the creativity from midfield and trying to play the right balls, making the right options. They're just often going for just safe square balls, keeping hold of it, recycling it. And the forward players, you could see today Rashford getting frustrated at one point. Martial as well always looks like he's frustrated even when he's happy, but yeah, today especially so. And I mean, Garner is one that I think needs to maybe be given a chance in the first team. The other one that all season I've been wanting to see after his kind of pre-season was Gomez. And he's had another start. And again, I thought he started really brightly, took a couple of plays on, played a few balls. But after about 30 minutes, he seemed to fizzle out a bit, which is a bit disappointing to me. And I totally agree with you on Chong, by the way. I think we've already mentioned him on this podcast a few times, and none of us have been that impressed with him and don't really see... I mean, there's talk about the fact that he needs to be signing a new contract, and to be honest, I'm not bothered if he doesn't, because I don't see him as somebody who's got a future at the club at all. Whereas I would be disappointed to see Gomez go. I mean, he's got so much skill and you can see so much technique in him on the ball. But yeah, maybe physically he's a player that's going to need a bit more time before he's ready for, like, what do we call it? Big grown-up. I can't remember the name of the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Full grown-up man-sized football or whatever. But yeah, as I said, these were the ones I was looking out for. And yeah, Garner I thought did very well. Laird did very well. Levitt was somebody who I didn't know that much about, but I was impressed by him. The only name on the team sheet that I knew virtually nothing about was Bernard. And he was pretty unlucky. He had a terrible second half because, one, he gives away an own goal, and even for the other goal, he was kind of slightly to blame. But yeah, look, he's a young kid and you can't expect too much from him at that point. But yeah, Tuanzebe next to him had a good match. But yeah, these are the ones I want to be seeing. Your standout performer in that match, you're giving it to Lingard, are you?
Obviously, he's not playing against the best opposition, and he is the senior member of the squad. You would expect him to be the standout performer. But I think the brush that we tar him with, it would have been so easy for him to not be the standout player and to sulk and to think, oh, I shouldn't be here. I should be back home where Rashi and Anthony and all the other first team squad members, I should be there. And he didn't do that. He did lead by example, and that was good to see. And he does deserve the positive press that he got after this performance. I know a few the more refutable sources rated him as our man of the match, and it was good to see. But yeah, as pleased as I was for him, I was really disappointed by Chong. I just don't ever see him making it at our club, and I think that type of game, even though it is away in difficult circumstances, you need to be able to stand out, and he just didn't do anything to stand out. If anything, he stopped Laird from having an even better game. There were so many times that he could have used them and just didn't. So Laird's performance, I think, was maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10. I think if Chong had involved him a bit more, then he would have had more opportunities to be as effective as an attack as we saw him be in that first half. So yeah, Chong for me is maybe he needs a loan, but I don't see that loan being at a big team, maybe a bottom level Premier League team or even a Championship team. I just don't think he's good enough. And then the point you make about Garner and Gomez, obviously they're two of our more exciting talents. And I think if you think what they can be together, like Garner's quick ball recycling and Gomez's his first touches and the way he uses like a small amount of space effectively, I think that combination could hopefully turn into something for us. But it's hard to know whether Gomez is going to be up to it physically because he's so small. I mean, he's just looking in that field. I know he's young, but he's just noticeably smaller than everyone else. And I just don't know if that body is going to hold up in the Premier League or if he might benefit to a move to a much more leisurely league like La Liga. I know there's a lot of teams there interested in him and monitoring his contract, but I want him to make it because I see the technique and think, wow, that's potentially world-class level. I just don't know if he's going to have the physicality. Whereas Garner, on the other hand, I think that's a Premier League midfielder just waiting to happen.
Yeah, I think with Gomez, maybe it's going to be more difficult for him to come into the team at such a young age because of, like you say, the physical thing. You know, this is what happened to McTominay. They say that he went away one summer and grew like 5 inches or something, and all of a sudden he was ready to play Premier League football. Whereas, yeah, Gomez is, you can see he looks so tiny when he's out there, but when he's on the ball, and it's exactly that kind of player that we're missing in that kind of number 10 area who can be creative, who can take somebody on, play the right ball. That is why I'd really wanted to see more of him. And as I say, he started the game well, but fizzled out a little bit. But the whole team kind of did, which is not that surprising. And as well, yeah, you mentioned Chong. We must mention that he missed an absolute sitter. And Astana went up the other end and literally scored like 30 seconds later. And that was the difference between winning and losing that match, pretty much.
Yeah, I didn't even want to talk about that miss. You just can't miss those.
And yeah, I think it actually affected him because he got substituted, even though he should be one of those kind of, the more senior off the kids. He was taken off after an hour, which is pretty embarrassing for him, I'd say. And but yeah, look, that's the way it goes. But yeah, look, we had four debutants right at the start there who were, Levitt, Bernard. Who else? There was definitely 4 who were led as well. And in fact, the other young debutant was Lee Grant, of course, who made his United debut at whatever it is, 36 or 37 years old, I think. I couldn't believe, though, that some people were criticising Ole for taking that young team over there. I saw like absolutely ridiculous comments saying, I can't believe we've lost to Astana, how embarrassing, Kazakhstan. I was like, do you not realise that we've already qualified, that we're giving young players a chance here and giving first teamers a rest? Like, how can anyone have moaned about that? I just couldn't believe at all. I didn't care about the result at all. We've already gone through, who's bothered? And especially, do we really want to be sending our players on this trip to the other end of like Siberia? Sometimes it just like can't understand people like to moan about anything really. But yeah, I think that's the way it is nowadays, unfortunately.
Really a lack of understanding, and they probably just checked the result. I very much doubt those people watched the entire game or have watched 90 minutes of every game this season. They just see the result, and when you look at it on paper, Astana 2, Manchester United 1, it does look bad, but there's a much broader picture there. And I don't know whether it's cool to be negative or whether they just genuinely think that small of the club. It's just the way people are these days, and trying to navigate that, especially on our forum, is proving more and more difficult because people just roll in with the negativity, and it's tough to look away from it because the results haven't been great. But with something like Astana away, there was a clear plan, there was a clear strategy. We don't take our first team players there, we give them a rest, and we get to get some young guys some hugely valuable experience. I mean, let's not take away from the fact that there were 3 guys on that field that it was the biggest moment of their life because they made their debut for Manchester United in an official game in Europe. It's the biggest day of their life, and it's the biggest day of their family's life. And if that's the only positive that we can take from that, then it was worth it. Because like you say, we had already qualified. It was a nothing game. And there's some young guys in there who got experience that even if they don't go on to accomplish great things in the sport, it was still the right thing to do to give them that shot and let them experience an event like that.
Yeah, and in fact, there was 6 in the end. plus Lee Grant making their debuts, because 3 came off the bench. Galbraith, who you mentioned, Ramzani, and there's one more who I've forgotten now. But yeah, look, great for them to go out there, and I just can't see how anybody saw any negatives in that. Yeah, all right, we lost the match, but yeah, who's bothered? We're already through, and that's the main thing. Anyway, look, after these couple of bad games there, thankfully, we've got 2 easy games coming up with Jose and Pep Guardiola. Yeah, look, there's going to be a big circus coming to town on Wednesday. Basically, yeah, we go straight back into the Premier League. No, not much time to dwell on the result today. Jose Mourinho's coming back. I think, as I said last week, it's the first time one of our old managers comes back to Old Trafford, because Moyes didn't do it, and obviously Van Gaal has not managed again. So yeah, it's the first time we get him coming. We'll see what kind of reception he gets. I'm very worried about what our midfield is going to be, and I'm pretty sure Jose is not going to take any prisoners. He knows a lot of these players here himself. And although I'm a big supporter of Ole and what he wants to do long term, I myself have said, look, he's not really going to be the greatest tactician or anything. And so this week, where he's going to be coming head to head with Jose Mourinho and Pep Guardiola, it's going to be a big, big test for him. One thing, though, I will say is that we have actually looked better in the big matches rather than when we play Villa, when we play Sheffield United, when we've played like Liverpool. We had a good result against Chelsea twice. So it is actually those kind of matches that have actually suited us. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how Jose decides to set up against us, because I'm sure everybody knows that we are stronger on the kind of counter, and he'll have go like that. But yeah, you're looking forward to that game, or you have a bit of trepidation about Jose coming back to Old Trafford?
I can't help but feeling that the story is writing itself. I mean, football is a game of stories, and most of them are created by the media. But when you think of the situation as a whole, Mourinho leaves, Solskjaer takes him over. Solskjaer has an unbelievable start to his career and then starts to fade, and then everyone starts saying, well, maybe Mourinho had it right. Maybe the squad of players wasn't as good as what we thought. We've since had that proved to be right. I think that's a fair statement to make. Solskjaer did not inherit the best of squads. And now Mourinho's coming back when Solskjaer is under unreal pressure. And it's almost like it's going to be the proverbial final nail in the coffin for Ole. Mourinho returns, Tottenham have a 2 or a 3-0 win at Old Trafford, and then we wake up in the morning and Ole is gone. It's hard not to pay attention to stories that write themselves as perfectly as that from a media narrative point of view. But as far as Jose coming back, to me, he's not going to come with a Tottenham that's going to play expansive, free-flowing football. He is going to be pragmatic like he always is. I don't think he has as good a midfield as what some of us have been led to believe about Tottenham. And for me, it's going to be a tight game, maybe 1-0 either way. But the fact of the matter is Jose knows our team inside out, what they're capable of, what their limitations are. I think he did have it spot on while he was here. And he'll know, if anyone knows how to exploit it, he will. I look at the Man City match and Guardiola, and these days I just hope that City don't take 3 or 4 off of us and it's a reasonably competitive game. And I know that they're playing for the Premier League aspirations at the moment. I mean, another defeat to them, and I think even your most optimistic fan will be saying it's over. But it's 2 tough games, and it's going to be so interesting to see how Solskjaer sets up, because you're right, he does perform better in the bigger games. And that's because we're a counter-attacking team. And when we play against bigger teams, usually they throw more bodies forward, and it enables us to use our counter-attacking to effect, as opposed to like Aston Villa or Sheffield United, where there's always 7 or 8 guys behind the ball. Against bigger teams, we get the chance to see it being more effective. But I have a feeling that Jose is going to come, sit and park the bus, make it very difficult for us, and I'd be surprised if we won the game, to be honest. But it's one of those situations where you just can't help but see the story writing itself, and Jose is the one who sends Ole to his next job.
Yeah, you're right. There is so much backstory to this one, and yeah, we've not even mentioned Pochettino yet on this show. We did get a lot of chat on him last week, but yeah, obviously he's a big part of this story as well, because a lot of people have installed him as favourites to replace Ole if things don't go the right way. Jose, he's had 3 wins out of 3 for Tottenham so far, but they've conceded 2 goals in each one of those games. So the defence is definitely something that needs to be got at. At the same time, if there's any manager out there who knows Rashford, who knows Martial, it is him. And he didn't give either of them the amount of game time that I think, or at least not in the positions that really suited them. That I thought Martial especially was one who really lost out under him. So I'm hoping that he can be the one who really comes back to prove a point to Jose. And in fact, in the last 2 matches against Sheffield United and Aston Villa, Martial has not been that good at all. I mean, he had a couple of chances today. One where he was kind of unlucky with that kind of chip where it goes over the bar, where he was like just a couple of yards out. I mean, it's not as easy as it might have looked. But yeah, I've not seen him getting into the game enough at all. And yeah, again, part of that comes down to not getting the service from midfield or maybe not getting the balls. But one thing we didn't mention when we were going through that Villa game was there was at least 2, if not 3 balls that Daniel James or Wan-Bissaka have hit straight across the 6-yard box and there's nobody there. And that is exactly where Martial needs to be. I think that's one of the reasons that Ole took him off and replaced him with Greenwood today. But yeah, look, if there's one game for him to come back and show what he can do, then it's got to be to show Jose that he was wrong all along. And this is what I'm hoping that he comes and does when Tottenham come on Wednesday. Yeah, look, as I say, it's all going to be about Jose's return. It's up to all. I do just still worry about who's going to play in midfield for us because I just can't imagine what kind of mess it's going to be if Andreas starts there again. I hope by the McTominay's fit, or as I said earlier, if Tuanzebe comes back in, I would be much happier with Tuanzebe or Lindelof playing in a defensive midfield role ahead of like Andreas. That for me is the last thing we can be doing because he's just shown for the 2nd week in a row that he's not up to playing that position. And yeah, if we talk about Manchester City, at least they're not in a good run of form at the moment. Just drawn 2-2 with Newcastle. Although, yeah, again, I looked at the XG for that and it was something absolutely mental. Like it said that City should have won that game about 3-0, but they've come away 2-2 from that. But yeah, they're slightly struggling in defence with a couple of players out. They've got Aguero out. So yeah, maybe that's something that we can look a bit more forward to. But yeah, again, the tactical matchups here are going to be the times where Ole has to show that he is up to being in this job. These are the days where he's got to show what he's really made of and see what he can come up with. As I say, he has generally had a better performance in these big games, so that is something that we can go to. Plus, I do think that our second half performance today was vastly improved. So yeah, it doesn't mean we're going into these matches with no hope, but for me, as I say, until I see who's available in our midfield, I can't go in with a lot of confidence because if we start again with that midfield, then yeah, I'm not going to be putting any money on us winning these games, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. We won't know until Wednesday and we see the starting lineup for sure. I just hope to God he doesn't think about playing 3 at the back because that's it just doesn't work.
But yeah, you say it doesn't work, but there was it worked quite successfully for us for a couple of times earlier in the season, especially like away from home. Obviously it didn't work last week because Phil Jones was not ready to be playing there, and it's possible he might well do that. We are playing at home against Tottenham and then going away to City, but I wouldn't be surprised actually for him to go 3 at the back, especially with Tuanzebe back in as an option. I don't think I think he's still injured at the moment. But yeah, did you not think we played well with 3 at the back earlier in the season? Even though I know last week against Sheffield United it didn't work at all. But I think it was even against Tottenham where Ole first did that thing where he did like split forwards with Rashford and Martial coming in from kind of wide, and it worked so well last season. And something like that could be interesting again, I think.
It's just whenever I see us play 3 at the back, immediately just assume that we're giving up the battle in the middle of the park because we're probably going to play with 2 there instead of 3. And Tottenham's midfield the past 3 games has got into a little bit of a run. They are playing with 3 there predominantly, with Ali a bit further forward. And I just think they'll have a field day with the amount of space that we would give them. Because when you play 3 at the back, it negates the need for that whole holding defensive midfielder. And it might be nice if we do play Fred and Pereira in there. It might be maybe Pereira goes and has a really good game because he's got no defensive responsibility. But I think against the Spurs team of the last 3 games, I just think they'll get control of the middle of the park, and I don't think you can give their type of players that much time on the ball without them punishing you. I'd much rather see us go like for like, do what we can to win the midfield battle, and a lot of that is going to depend on the availability of McTominay and Pogba. But I just think if we deliberately outnumber ourselves in midfield by selecting 3 central defenders, I just think it's a recipe for disaster, and Tottenham will be able to control the game, even though it's at Old Trafford.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pogba's got no chance of being involved here. And of course, there's already rumours doing the rounds that he's not even injured, but I don't believe that personally. Even if McTominay is back, because we're only talking 3 days away, he's unlikely to be 100%. So yeah, again, it comes back to whether you risk that or not. I personally would be happy to put, whether it's both Tuanzebe and Lindelof has been mentioned as players who have at certain times in their career played in a kind of defensive midfield role. You're always reluctant to put players out of position, but yeah, for me, I would be going with that kind of thing over Andreas again. And I don't mind Andreas playing number 10. He's not the best there, but I think he's okay. It's only when he's more playing that number 8, which has just not worked for the last couple of weeks at all. So yeah, let's see how we go there. I mean, do you want to put any predictions on this? As I said, yeah, it's difficult until we know who's available. But yeah, why don't we throw out a couple of predictions? What do you think? So we've got Tottenham at home Wednesday, and then City away. What are your 2 predictions for these matches?
I'm going to go with the head predictions, and I'm going to go 1-1 on Wednesday. And then against City, I'm going to go 2-0 to them.
Okay, it's coming out with 1 point. And yeah, if we go on that kind of run, then yeah, you'd probably say that, yeah, Ole's position is starting to look pretty dodgy if he comes out only with 1 point from those 2 matches. I'm always trying to look on the glass half full side, so going to be a bit more positive. And I think, as I say, I'm looking at a player like Martial to say, right, this is the day I want to prove Jose wrong. And I think we can beat Tottenham. Just because of that, there's going to be so much riding on it. They're all going to be waiting for Jose to come back. They want to do their thing. So I think we can win that match against Tottenham. I'm not going to predict a win away to City. I can't see that. But yeah, looking positive, I think we can nick a 1-1 draw there. And then, yeah, we go back to another European game after that. But for sure, we'll be coming back to record. I think as well that Ed is going to be trying to do one of his opposition fan series with a Tottenham fan after that match, because there'll be a lot to talk about.
I'm looking forward to it. It's always drama with Mourinho involved, and it'll just be interesting to see how he sets up against us. Looking forward, I guess, to the January transfer window is a ever-approaching talking point right now. Not 100% sure the players that we're being linked with are going to be the right fits for us. I'd still rather lean on the side of giving the youth the chance this season, and preferably Ole being the one to see it out and getting his full team back. But no, it's an interesting couple of fixtures we have coming up, and if we're going to be in the state where we don't get results in the next 2 games, and we're looking at potentially 2 or 3 points from the last 12, whilst the league has been so... there's not much movement going on between 5th and down to 13th. You can jump up 7-8 places just by winning 1 game. And I don't want to see Chelsea and Leicester, who I do think will fall off eventually. I just don't want to see these teams getting too far ahead of us, because when we do get a full team back, I do expect us to go on a bit more of a run. And hopefully top 4 is not unrealistic by then. Right now it's already getting there, but with Chelsea losing to West Ham and then us not winning today, the next 2 games are huge for us, because if Chelsea win both and Leicester win both, you can start realistically waving goodbye to top 4, and yeah, it's not a good place to be in before the 2020 begins.
No, I agree with you, and like I say, today that was the big frustration. You win that, you go into 5th place, you're 6 points off top 4, and you're really in that battle. But yeah, it's a totally different picture now. And especially with these 2 very difficult games coming up. The Ole out thing is very bizarre. I don't know if you follow the kind of Ole out-ometer on Red Cafe. It had been majority out, then he'd had a kind of good month, and it had kind of gone back to about 50-50. Now in the past couple of weeks, it's eked a bit back the other side, and it's something like, I think, 53% out and 47% in. The bizarre thing, though, is that I have looked at a couple of other polls. Like there's another forum which is more like a kind of matchgoers forum, and I was just looking at it just before the show today, and on there there's still 75% of fans are supporting for Ole to be staying in. So there's like a vast difference between the kind of opinion of a lot of people who'd say are more matchgoers compared to somewhere like Red Cafe, where there's a much more of a mix with a lot more global fans and things like that. So I would say that in the stadium, there is still a lot of support for Ole, and that's mostly because they think that he's not been given a strong enough squad, and it's not his fault. And they really blame more Woodward, the Glazers, and for them, that's really where the problems come from. And I'm kind of more in that camp. Although, I do think, week by week, as the results don't go, then, it does get more and more difficult, and you start wavering and thinking, is this really the best way forward? Plus, for me, as I said, we haven't really mentioned Pochettino, but I've always been a massive fan of his. When somebody like that is available, then it does start to think to me as well that, look, maybe we should not be passing up the chance to bring somebody like that in.
Yeah, if Pochettino wasn't available right now, to be honest, I wouldn't even be considering myself in the Ole out camp. I know those match-going fans they're probably more likely to be in his favour, because when you go to the game, you feel much more connected to the club. I find you're much more part of things. I mean, you're close enough to see Ole on the sidelines, and you can see how much it means to him and his staff and all the players. Right, you just feel more part of things when you're at the game. So it doesn't surprise me, those statistics. It's very easy to be an armchair fan and just say, oh well, we drew 2 games in a row, get him out, and then just click a button that says Ole out. I think the match-going fans they just want to see him turn it around. They know he has a banner as a player in the stadium. He's forever a legend of our club. And we just want to see him turn it around. But when you have a manager that you pretty much be certain is going to come in and improve the players, and I think that's what Pochettino does. He takes any player and improves them. He's a great man manager. And I think when he's there, it's just difficult to not start wondering what could be if he's in charge of us before the end of the season or going into next year. And if someone else snaps them up and then they go on a good run and Pochettino ends up winning the trophy a year or 2 from now, I think we'll regret it. And that's the only reason I'm not firmly in the Ole stays and Ole in camp.
Fair enough, and I can totally see where you're coming from. Look, thanks for joining today, David. I'm sure we'll try and get you on again later on in the season to see where we're at. Why don't you give a plug to, I know you're just getting involved in another podcast yourself, which is a non-footballing one. So feel free to give yourself a shout out for that.
I appreciate the opportunity to give a shout out. If anyone wants to listen to it, it's just myself and a co-host. We interview some guests. Some of them will be well known to people. And we just talk about their mindset, what they've accomplished in their life, what they've overcome, any tragedies, trauma, and then we analyse it from a behavioural psychology point of view. So if anyone is interested in anything like that, it's called Mindset Stories, and you can get it on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and on Podomatic as well. So feel free to leave a good review and a good rating. I know there will be some people listening to this and probably jump right on and give it a 1 star, but that's fine. But feel free to listen to it. We have some pretty interesting guests, some of them, like I say, really well known, and it's an interesting venture, and we'll see how it goes. But thanks very much for having me on. I always wanted to be on this podcast and get the chance to talk about the team I love. I can't go see them as often as I'd like anymore due to my location in Canada. But no, I always love hearing the insight of you guys, and it's good to be a part of it. So thanks for the opportunity, Nick. I really appreciate it.
No problem. As I said, I'm sure we'll get you on again. Let's see later on this season we can reflect back on where we're at. But I think that's all from us for now. As I said, hopefully Ed will be back with an opposition podcast featuring one of our resident Spurs fans from Red Cafe. And for the full pod, I think we'll be back just after the City game. So see you all then. Good night for now.
Good night.